Alrighty, guys. Hopefully you had a great lunch and enjoyed the talks from Peter at 1E. So it's great to have sponsors like 1E helping out with the event to help keep costs down and make these things possible. So it's fantastic. And hopefully you all enjoy the venue. It's been a really nice venue. I've really liked it compared to where we've been in the past, which wasn't bad, but this is a step up. So this next presentation we're going to do is on managing non-Windows clients in Service Pack 1. It says non-Windows clients, but we're also going to talk in here a little bit about Windows RT and Windows Phone 8. But when we say non-Windows, we're talking about the non-traditional Windows environments, so your laptop, desktop server. So what we're going to talk about here is mobile device support that we have coming in Service Pack 1. You know, what we have today, what's in Service Pack 1. Then we'll talk about Linux, UNIX, and then we'll go ahead and talk about Macintosh. And then just a slide or two on the endpoint protection product that we already have out there for Macintoshes and the Linux Unix environments. So challenges to enabling consumerization, and you guys are probably on the far end of it compared to a lot of other places, but in the past, in your organization, you guys, as admins, you were in control of what devices your end users would use. You gave them a laptop, or you gave them a desktop, and that's what they used. And then over the past half dozen years or so, the iPhones, the iPads, and Blackberries, and Androids, and everything else. Everybody now is starting to use some sort of a mobile device. And they're bringing them into your workplaces, and they want to use those to access data, email, or other information through your corporate network. And so you have to be able to allow that consumerization or the end user the ability of picking their device that they want to use and still provide some level of support for it. So remember that very first slide I showed in the first presentation had the empowering users. And I mentioned that in the RTM, it was more about assigning software to users. And in SP1, it's more allowing the end user to have the choice of platform they want to use to do their work. So you need to provide that flexibility for end users, but it's still, you guys as IT staff or security teams or whatever, you got to go through the process of making sure your data is secure. So how can you support and manage all the devices that your end users want, and then still give the governance and controls over what you need to do to restrict your data. And it's more, again, changing the approach to client management, which is putting the end user in control of the device they want to use to get their job done and access their corporate resources. It's getting much harder now to say, no, you can't bring your iPad in, and no, you can't use your Mac laptop in here, no, you can't do this to do your work. So. Okay, so again, you're putting end user more in control over the experience that they have. This is what software they want to use, what software they're going to install on their device. It's not necessarily about who owns the device, but what they can do with that device nowadays. And since you're doing end user devices, they're bringing their own devices into their workplace. It's more about whole software distribution or optional available software distribution. End user makes that choice versus you pushing software like you might to their desktop or their laptop computer that is a corporate-owned device. And you still need to make sure that they have appropriate security so that your data in your environment is protected. So what we have today are two different solutions. So for managing your traditional Windows environments, your laptops, desktop servers, Windows XP up through Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 R2, in today's environment, it is ConfigMgr 2012 RTM. Notice I didn't say Windows 8 and Windows Server 2012 because RTM product doesn't support it. So for the other platforms, Windows XP, Service Pack 3, up through the previous release of the operating systems, Windows 7, Windows Server 2008 R2, it was ConfigMgr 2012 as an on-premise solution. And you had all the normal features, inventory, and discovery, and hardware, software inventory, and software distribution, metering, and patching, and endpoint protection, OSD, and so on. That's all great. You use our on-premise infrastructure with our admin console to do the administration. For those mobile devices you had two solutions. One solution was the in-depth solution, we call it. So for those few platforms we had a client agent, you could enroll that box, put the client agent on it, and then get some discovery and inventory and some push-based software distribution and some settings management remote-wide. But that was really restricted on the platforms we supported. Windows Mobile 6.1, Windows Phone 6.5, and Nokia Symbian devices, Nokia Bell devices. Outside that, you had to go to the Exchange Active Sync connector. whether it was an iOS device, whether it was an Android, whether it was a Windows Phone 7 device, or anything else outside of those few that we had a client agent for. You had to go through the Exchange Active Sync environment. So you have an Exchange environment, whether it's Exchange 2010 or whether it's Exchange Online, and then you can go ahead and do your synchronization. We find out about those devices and a little bit of inventory, I mean very minuscule amount of inventory, and a handful of settings you could push down to it, and then remote wipe. That was really about all you got. So you have that capability. Ultimately, we've had this product for a little while now called Windows Intune. It's a cloud-based service, a subscription service, that will let you do management of other type of devices. So if you didn't want an on-premise solution, and it started out being more for the smaller type environments, so they didn't have the resources to do the on-premise stuff, and so they would do a cloud-based subscription service. You can manage your Windows PCs, you can manage those same type of handheld or mobile devices with Windows Intune like you could with ConfigMgr. You just didn't have all the same capabilities. You know, operating system deployment, not as much flexibility. But you had some ability of getting these guys managed through your corporate infrastructure. But it was a choice you would have to make. Do I install Configuration Manager on this device, or do I install the Windows Intune agent? It was a clear choice you would have to make, and sometimes it wasn't so clear. You'd have to, wait, I can do this one device, like some of those I can do by both. What do I do there? So it's a problem people have to deal with. So where we're going in the future being Service Pack 1, and the next release of Windows Intune, which is what they call Wave D. And it's going to be releasing it around the same time as our Service Pack 1 at the beginning of 2013, or early 2013, is you're still going to have two different solutions. You're going to have ConfigMan 2012 Service Pack 1, and there's still going to be a Windows Intune product. So you still have those two. But hopefully we're making things a little clearer for you. So you still have all the traditional Windows devices we talked about before. Windows XP through Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7. Our client support in SP1 doesn't drop any clients that we support today. So all we're doing is adding new clients, and those are all the ones in the green that you need to manage. So we are adding support for Macintosh clients and Linux clients that we'll talk about later on in this presentation. We've obviously already talked quite a bit about Windows 8 devices, so we're adding support for those. And then you have these other type of devices, Windows RT, which runs on different architecture. You have Windows Phone 8, you have your iOS devices, you have your Android devices, and additional type of mobile devices you have. So you can manage various flavors of these with these two different solutions. So your Macs, your Linux, your Windows, your traditional Windows type devices, you manage through Configuration Manager, just like you would today. Just that now we're giving you that support for the Mac as well as the Linux Unix environment. And it's using our on-premise solution with our administrator console for doing that experience. So for you guys that have been there for a while, nothing really changes. You just need some new platforms. For the Windows Intune environment, you can manage the traditional Windows systems, including the Windows 8 stuff that's coming out, as well as the Windows RT, Windows Phone 8, iOS, Android, kind of the same stuff you do today, but with some additional capabilities. It doesn't manage the Mac and Linux. So you have two different solutions, and they each have their own administrative console. You guys are familiar with our console, and Intune has its own administrative console. It's rather basic in what the capabilities it provides. So right there, you're not seeing anything different really from what that previous slide showed you, other than some new platforms up there. What we're doing with Service Pack 1, however, is we're allowing you to utilize the Configuration Manager console as the administrative portal into managing these other devices through Windows Intune. So for your Windows RT, your Windows Phone 8, the iOS, the Android scenario, they're still going to be managed by Windows Intune. We don't manage them natively within Configuration Manager. There's not a Configuration Manager client agent for those platforms. It's a client agent through Windows Intune. However, you would never have to load the Windows Intune console to do your day-to-day management of those devices. You do your management in your ConfigMan console, which is where you're managing your Maxes, your Linux, your other Windows devices. So you can do all the management through one single, as we call single pane of glass, or one console. But you do have to integrate between those two different solutions that we provide. Now, a little bit more on those. For the iOS, it's iOS 5X and 6X. So 5.0 and 6.0. It's iPhones, iPads, and I've even seen people talk about iPods that you can do management through Intune. But it's managed through the cloud, so it's managed through that cloud infrastructure as opposed to the on-premise. As far as the end result is, it goes to the cloud. You can use our console to provide that administrative experience, but it's really managed through the cloud. Features, pull software distribution. Being I'm on my phone, I can choose which software I want to install on my phone. You're not dictating that software, you're not forcing it down on me. It's pull-based software distribution. Then we have additional settings management, not just your camera settings, not just your PIN required type stuff, your email settings, additional settings that you can go ahead and deploy, more like the, not quite as complete, but more like the scenario that you have with the depth management with the Windows Mobile 6.1, Windows Mobile 6.5, and the Nokia Bell environments. Device wipe, so you can still say, hey, my device has been compromised, clean it up. And then compliance monitoring, so verifying that you are compliant with the software that you want out there or the appropriate settings. So certainly much more rich. We do have client agent. It's not config manager. It's Windows Intune client agent that will run on top of these devices. So there is an agent there, so it's giving you those additional capabilities. For the Android scenario, you have two different choices. You can do the pure Exchange Active Sync connection like you have today with Configuration Manager 2012, which gives you the settings management, the very basic set of settings management, and remote wipe. That's it. If you want to go beyond that with the cloud infrastructure through Windows Intune, then you also get some additional settings, as well as you get the pull-based software distribution. You saw when I did the demo of the Windows 8 app, I showed you the Android local install or from local source, as well as the Google Play store. So you can do software distribution through the Windows Intune infrastructure and integration. You don't have quite the same capabilities here because there's not a client agent written for the Android device for Intune yet. So we know it's really high on the list to do, but it's not there. It's not going to make service pack wide. That's why you don't see the same set of solutions here as you do for the iOS environment, because there is a client agent here, so you have more capabilities. Android will be coming. We are going to have one, which is not going to make service pack 1. So at some point in the future, we'll have a client agent for the Android environment. And before we move on to the Linux Unix environment, we do support management, obviously, with Windows Phone 8. It is through the Exchange, or excuse me, the Exchange. It can be done through the Exchange Active Sync connector, or it's done through the Windows Intune infrastructure. If you want to do the pull-based software distribution type stuff, it's done through that scenario. Same as Windows RT. So you're managing them through Windows Intune with the client agent they have. So it's not managed natively within Configuration Manager, other than the fact that you can go through the Exchange Active Sync connector and manage them, but it's, again, very limited what you have for management. So light management capabilities natively with EAS. Your more depth management capabilities are coming through the integration with Windows Intune. And it's not the Windows Intune you guys have access to today. It's Windows Intune Wave D, which is, again, the next release that's coming out at the same time as us, which is early 2013. Okay? So questions on that before I move off of the mobile. We still have the same capabilities with the depth management for our client agent, Windows Mobile 6.1, Windows Phone 6.5, and the Nokia Bell systems. And then we've added some more platforms for the Nokia environment. But same scenario you've had before with software distribution and inventory and more complete settings management and remote wipe and so on.
Have you plans to create a native config manager client for Windows 8 phone and RT devices, so you could manage those devices with our cloud solution?
The current statement that I'm allowed to state is that the current time frame, which is we have support through Windows Intune cloud-based infrastructure. So that's all I'm allowed to say. You guys are laughing, but that's all I'm allowed to say. Laugh all you want. The story's not changing. Anything else I can't answer for it, I can brush off. I'm telling you all I'm allowed to tell you. I think I said something I wasn't supposed to say already. So good thing it's not being videotaped. It's a good thing nobody else can see these videotapes. I think I went one step too far in something I said. So I'm going to move off quickly to the next thing. And that is heterogeneous support. And this being native support within Configuration Manager. So a Configuration Manager client agent being stuffed on these new platforms to give you some pretty decent capabilities as far as management goes. So our goal is to make Linux Linux and Unix servers manageable just like you do your Windows desktops. And the same thing for Macintosh. Make Macintosh clients managed through Configuration Manager. So they become more and more prevalent within the environments that you guys have, and people now decided they want some centralized management of it. We used to have Macintosh support way long ago in like SMS 1.2, and they removed it because nobody was really using it. And now everybody wants it back, so we got in and put the Macintosh support back in. So how many of you have Macintoshes in your environment that you manage? Okay, I was going to say nobody, I'm going to skip it. How about Linux, Unix? Handful, so maybe way more, not way more, but more Macintoshes than Linux, Unix. Okay. All right. So the first section here, or the next section, is on the Linux, Unix, and then the section after that will be on the Macintosh platform. And I'll do a demo of the Linux, Unix environment, and then Pandu will do a demo in his environment of the Macintosh environment scenario. Okay, supported platforms. This is not going to give you the full details. I've got slides with full details on it, but Mac OS X, and then various different flavors of Linux and Unix. Server-based environments, not desktop-based environments for the Linux and Unix. And you'll see the support there. Endpoint protection. We have already released earlier this year endpoint protection for the Macintosh, the Red Hat, and the SUSE environments. That's already available. Volume licensed customers can go download that. And I've got a couple slides on that towards the very end of this deck. Okay, so Linux and Unix. Here it gives you a more detailed breakdown of the different platforms that we support. So quite a bunch of different versions of the operating systems that are being supported. So a pretty good cross-section of those. We'll add more. I think it's on this next slide. Again, you guys get these slides later on. But we'll add new versions of these operating systems within 180 days of the OS being released by the vendor. So once those appropriate operating system owners and so on, they release that, it'll take us a while to get new support for it. Traditionally, you guys know in the Windows environment, we state it's 90 days. So with the release of a new operating system, within 90 days, we have support with the Configuration Manager. Here it's taking us longer because we have different unique client agents for the different operating systems. So there's different installers, there's different install scripts for the different OSs, so it takes us a while to build those appropriately. So, and then new distros will be supported and available as soon as we can. And we'll keep support for older OSs as long as the appropriate operating system vendor supports them. When they drop support, we're going to drop support. So our goal is to get the support for new versions of the OSs out as soon as we can for you guys. So
one question.
Yes.
If you have those non-supported Linux distros, should the client work on those, even though you are shut on, but you could try and install them?
You're always welcome.
That they won't work.
I don't know that they won't work. You're always welcome to try anything you want to in an unsupported scenario. So, but those are the only ones we're saying you're going to be able to make it work for sure. So the nice thing is that for the Linux Unix environment, you're going to see a framework here, architecture, and it's going to look very, very similar to what you have for a Windows environment. And that's the goal, to try and make it act as much like Windows as possible. So there's going to be no new server roles required for support of Linux and Unix. So no new server roles at all for this. Standard distribution point, standard management point is what you're using. Now, there is going to be a client agent you're going to install, and I'll show you how quickly the client agent installs in my Linux VM that I have running, and we'll show you that works pretty well. It's a pretty quick install, and you'll have CCMexec. So basically, the client servers that you guys know from your Windows environment will be running on top of your appropriate Linux Unix platform. You have communication with the normal management point, distribution point. HTTP works great for that. You're going to have, the Windows environment uses WMI for storage of local policies and hardware inventory data, so you can do Delta hardware inventories and so on. So we have a SIM server that runs on the Linux Unix environment to basically provide the support for WMI. WMI used to be in the original release called SIM, Common Information Model. And that actually was developed by the old SMS team. We're the ones that originally created WMI, so if you don't like it, you blame us. And we handed off to the OS team a number of years ago. Hoping they can make things better. They have. It's just taken a while. So we'll have a WMI layer. You have WMI providers that will give you the support for inventory and all the different capabilities and features that we have. And then you'll have, obviously, the rest of your OS resources locally. But we have the client agent and the appropriate WMI SIM layer that we're adding in. Okay, inventory. So you get hardware inventory, and you can view your hardware inventory just like you view a Windows box. You can go to the local computer in the console, and you can right-click and start Resource Explorer, and you can view inventory that way if you want to. And then you'll be able to view what inventory classes got returned in attributes. And I got a screenshot that will show you the details coming up here shortly. It also does include, as part of the hardware inventory, which is all we collect, the view of installed software. So very much like add remove programs in a Windows environment, you get the list of software registered in the box. Same thing for your Linux Unix environment. I pressed the button, there we go. You'll then want to create collections appropriate for your specific operating system versions you have or different hardware attributes. Just like you would for a Windows environment, you want to target software appropriately. So you want to go ahead and create appropriate collections for targeting software to your Linux Unix environment. And that'll be based on inventory properties. You can run our normal reports. So the information's in Resource Explorer, it's in our database, you can go ahead and run it with reports as well. So it'll just appear in a report just like a Windows box would be. If you just look at your operating system, it'll tell you the appropriate version of the operating system. And then you are allowed to extend your hardware inventory. So there's a slide come up here that talks about the OMI group, and you can go in there and go there for extension capabilities. So implementation, the open management infrastructure through SIM or the pseudo WMI is what's used. And there's where you can go to get the specs on it if you want to go ahead and do your extensions. Classes and attributes are mapped to the same as Windows. So we do map a lot of the same resources. You just don't get as much. You don't have as much capabilities there, but you do get quite a bit of inventory back. And then you can just view our console to go ahead and enable. For those of you that are in ConfigMgr 2007, you know the old SMS def-mod file that you go in there and modify. It doesn't exist in ConfigMgr 2012 anymore. The physical file doesn't. You have the definition in the UI, our console, where you go in there and modify which attributes and classes you want. You can do the same thing for your Linux and Unix environment. And again, you don't get all the same properties as you get with Windows. And we do support Delta inventories as well. So if you guys had played around with the beta version of SP1, there was a beta release of the Linux Unix client, and they had some issues with inventory. So inventory stamps were wrong, and Delta inventories didn't really work very well, and so on. That has been all cleaned up, so when you get to the RTM release, that'll be available to you. And you'll see much better support. Here's a listing of the inventory that's there by default. Again, you can go in there and extend this if you wish to give additional capabilities. And including the, where is it? The basic like add remove programs, which would install a list of applications down towards the bottom. But you do get the application list. Extensibility, again, you go in there and create custom WMI providers that would then go ahead and go through the OMI group to go ahead and write those appropriate providers that you want using your API set. Okay, well, you use inventory. Obviously, you want to have asset information, but predominantly use inventory information to build collections for targeting software distribution. So we do support software deployment to Linux and Unix environments. So we do support that software. You can do patching through software distribution. So there's no separate patching agent or patching service like we have with Configuration Manager with Windows clients, where you have the WSUS and software update point and the software updates agent on it that you do appropriate deployments there. You just create your patches are just deploying through the software distribution technology as a package and program. And this does use packages and programs, not the application modeler. So it's the old, what we call classic software distribution. It can uninstall or remove software as well, just with a package with the program that's the uninstall command line for the appropriate software. And deploy patches that it's already set as software. You can run whatever arbitrary maintenance scripts that you want to through packages and programs, which is what they're really good for. So here's a Windows scenario for software distributions to be compare and contrast between the Windows and Linux environment. So first thing you would do is your admin would go ahead and create a packages program. And that would write some stuff from the console into the site server database. You deploy your software. Here it says advertisement, which is the old ConfigMgr 2007 term. It's now called a deployment. So you advertise your software. The policy is made available to the client through the management point. And it comes from the database, but it comes through the management point. When it retrieves the policy, oh, there's a software I want to install. We try and install the software. We go back to the MP, find content location request. Where's the DP I can use to get access to my content? We go download the content over SMB or HTTP from the distribution point. We install the content locally through our local cache if we have it there. And we have maintenance windows available to help control that for required software, end user software, pull software, whatever they want. And we report status back. That's how the Windows stuff works. For the Linux and Unix environment, it works exactly the same. So you know the flow, so it's very, very similar. So you create your stuff in the console, you deploy your software, which you get in a package and program. You deploy it, it creates a policy that's set in the database. When your end user or when the client pulls policies, which will happen on your hourly scheduled basis, whatever your policy pulling interval is, using the same schedule that you have in Windows. It's going to go ahead and pull the policy from the MP, which gets it from the database, down to the client. It's required software distribution, so it's not pull, it's push-based software distribution. It then does a content location request to find the distribution point it has access to. So the client has to be within boundaries, your boundary groups, or you have to configure your deployment to support slow networks if you're not within the appropriate boundary groups. And it will download the content over HTTP, the local cache. It'll go ahead and install that software, and it will report back status. It does support maintenance windows, just like your Windows clients do. So you control when the software does get deployed on your device appropriately based on your collection-based maintenance windows. Then status goes back up, and you see success in your console. Hopefully a whole lot of successes and very few little failures or waiting for content or whatever. But it works, again, just like you do with the Windows environment. So existing console, existing hardware, being the database, the management point, and the distribution point, and management paradigms. So you work the same way for Linux, Unix software distribution as you do for Windows-based software distribution. So there's no relearning of anything or training people to do things differently now to do your Linux, Unix clients. Okay, so I'll kick in here, do a quick little demo for you, and then we'll come back and talk about the Macs and Linux. So let's go ahead and switch over here to, so I have, here's my Linux client. And it is not installed with the client yet. So here you can see I have my installer down here. The code, the client, and the installer does not come with Configuration Manager. You have to go up to the web to download it. So you'll go up to the our Microsoft Download Center, and you'll have the ability of downloading the appropriate client agents for Linux and Unix as well as Macintosh. So I've already done that. I downloaded this for my, this is a SUSE 11 operating system. I've already downloaded it, staged it my my local hard drive of the image, so I don't have to go out there and pull them from the wire. Before I do that, let me go over to my, no, it's sitting in my cable here. There we go. Go over to my site server, which is sitting right here. Before you do that, you want to have your client, or you want to have your support set up. So you need to have boundaries. So this guy's going to be wanting to access distribution point content. So I created a boundary here for my client. I just did an IP address range which has a single IP address in it. So that's my one Linux client. Obviously, you guys can have more than that, so you have a bigger boundary than my one, but you have to have a boundary, and it has to be in a boundary group if you want to have very easy software distribution. So I'm a boundary group, local clients and MCM. If I go look at the boundaries there, you can see that I have not just my AD site, which is what my Windows clients are using, but I also have the IP address range, which is for my Linux client. So it's in the appropriate boundary group, and that boundary group is set to access my primary site's distribution point. This DP on top of my site server. Now, Linux and Unix clients, traditionally not going to be domain joined. So you're going to have a network access account. You have to have a network access account to be able to access the content of the DP. So I already have that configured just to save the time. So go to Settings, Site Components, and Software Distribution. And here you can see I have it's grayed out because I've already got set, but you can see it's ConfigMgr DOM and a network access account. So I've got that account set. And the client will pull that policy down, it retrieves policies to know what the account is for software distribution to access the distribution point. So I've got my infrastructure set up. Now, if you guys had played around with the beta, there's one additional thing you had to do, which is you had to go to the hierarchy settings, go to client approval, and we told you in the beta that you had to choose this option at the bottom. Automatically approve all client computers, not recommended. All clients in ConfigMgr 2012 have to be approved before they get a policies. And you see the default was automatically approve computers in trusted domains. Well, again, it's a WordGrid client, so it's not a trusted domain, so it wouldn't get automatically approved. And the manual approval process didn't work in beta. It does now work in later builds. But so that's why mine is set to the default of automatically approved. So I'm going to click cancel. Okay, so my infrastructure is all set up. I don't need any other hardware, no additional type of site systems or anything. So I'll go back to my Linux client, and I'm going to go ahead and install. So I'll do a /install, and I have to tell it my MP that I want to use. Primary one, config, manager, dom.local. Very much like you'd use the /mp parameter, SMSMP, to set, here's the initial MP to go to get stuff. And then my site code, I have to tell it what site code I want to be a member of. I'm not going to do the SMS site code equals auto. So I have to give it my site code, MCM. And I just give it the installer. So I give it the installer that I have. And you see it's SUSE 11, 64-bit. And it's a very, very quick install. So the client agent is installed already. I go back to my site server, and then I go to my assets and compliance. I go to my devices, and there's my client. It's reported in already. So it's done. A quick little registration request is where it came from. If I go look at the properties of it, you'll see it says client registration is how it was discovered. It's not heartbeat discovery or AD discovery. It's done through client registration, just like a Windows client would, but you may happen to discover through AD first. We do have a new feature in SP1 is Agent Edition, and you can see it does say Linux and UNIX. So it does tell you the type of client that did get registered, so you'll see that. And then you don't see a whole lot of else properties here, but you do see things that are interesting from SP1, like connected standby capable, portable operating system, machine changes persisted for Windows embedded, right filter support, and so on. So we've got some new properties coming in SP1 Discover data. Operating system name and version is blank now, because we don't get that from registration information. We get that from Heartbeat Discovery, which you'll see that fill in just a minute. And so the last thing I have to do is, at the very bottom, is approved. Remember I said all clients have to be approved before they get policies, and this one says approved not. So it's not going to retrieve any policies. That guy's going to sit there forever until I approve it, because I'm set to automatically approve only domain joined trusted computers. And this guy's not, so I have to manually approve him. So I'll just right click and go approve. It says, are you sure you want to do this? I say yes. That now approves the client in the console. So now that computer is able to pull policies. So if I go back to my Linux client, I'll force it to pull policies so we don't have to sit and wait. I can config, bin, CCM exec, and just do an RS policy. That tells it to pull policies. I'll load you guys' equivalent of SMS trace or config manager trace. Microsoft SCXCM, not log. So it's pulling policies. It's just like CM trace just keeps showing all the new stuff that's added. And here you see in the middle it says a bunch of inventory. So it looks like it's taking hardware inventory automatically. It's not. What it's doing here is actually populating that SIM server store, WMI, with the properties, attributes, and classes it's going to collect later on. It does hardware inventory. But it does look like it did a hardware inventory process, which it really didn't do. So kind of a weird thing there. But so now it's done that, and the thing you're looking for here is where it says that hardware inventory, there are no more processing complete. The backlog is now 0. It's all done with what I wanted it to do. So it's done that. If I go back to my site server now and go back and look at the properties of this client, now it says Heartbeat Discovery. So it has reported in Heartbeat Discovery information from pulling in policies. It created Heartbeat DDR, and it updated the client version. It was 7765, I think, before. Now it's 7782, which is the build that I have for that client. And now we get operating system name and version. So now it tells me what the operating system is, because it came from Heartbeat DDR. And if we had looked before, if I had shown you this after I approved it, you would see down at the very bottom, it does say it is approved. It is approved client now. So it's reported in the Heartbeat DDR, which means it got policies, because that's the only way it knows a policy due to the Heartbeat DDR. Now I'll go ahead and force them to do hardware inventory real quick. I'll just change that policy to HM, and I'll spell it correctly this time. And we'll have it go as its log file. So I'm going to do software distribution. To do software distribution, I want to target collection. So I'll let hardware inventory collect this data and report it in. We'll see that momentarily. I want to create a collection. So if I go to device collections, there's not a device collection here for Linux clients. So I'm going to go ahead and create one real quick. I'll say Linux clients. Oops. And this will be a limited collection. I'll say it's limited to all my configuration manager clients. I'll say desktop and server clients. Desktop and server clients. And I'll say it's going to be query-based rule and Linux. And I'm going to go ahead and add a criteria to look just for my specific operating system. So you guys have seen this before. You know exactly what I'm doing. System resource, operating system name and version. And I'll say it's equal to SUSE 11x64. So a very simple process. You create your collection with your appropriate clients in it for targeting software distribution. It says 0. I'll go ahead and tell it to update collection membership. And then change it to 1. If I do a show members, there's my one Linux client. And it's as an active client. So now I've got a collection created for it. I should have hardware inventory done by now. You can verify, just look at my log files here real quick. I won't open up the log file. I'll just show you the date and timestamp. And it's 3:36 in the morning, so I'm waking up in 3 hours. So things will get better for you in another 3 hours. Ooh, and we'll still be here. So you're good. Data loader, 3:36, it just got done processing. So it just got done processing my Linux inventory, if you don't believe me. I guess I should make you believe me by just saying it did. But here it is, right here. Oops, Linux client. There it did process the Linux client inventory. So now, back in my database, I can go ahead and, bless you, twice. I can go ahead and do Start Resource Explorer. And there's inventory, there's the last date and time it took inventory, there's my operating system, there's processor information, my logical disk information, disk drives, whatever I want. It's all the appropriate inventory, including installed applications. So if you look at installed applications, we sort by display name. There's no, maybe down there, right in here, there's no SCX. There's no SCX. I'm going to deploy the Operations Manager Client Agent, which it starts with SCX as the service name, as the software name. So there's no SCX installed here. That's what we're going to go ahead and deploy. So I've got that information. I can go run a report, and reports will work the exact same way. It just shows the appropriate inventory information for the attribute I want. You've seen the hardware inventory information. Now let's do software distribution. So go to software library. Here's my package I created. I already created this just so I didn't have to go through the whole process, but I'll just show you real quickly what I did. My data source is just on my site server. I have the appropriate package that I want to deploy. It's called Linux package, was the source file name. The program I want to run for my client is an installation process, and the command line is rpm-uvh, and then the SCX and the rest of the file name. And I'm saying that I want to run only on appropriate platforms. Oops, I guess you guys might want to see that better, sorry. I went too fast for it. Let me blow up if you guys are Linux, Unix, and you understand RPM and stuff. That's the command line I'm going to run. And my requirements, I'm setting this to only run on specific platforms. So I'm saying just the platform I have. Now you're obviously, or very likely going to have more than one platform, so you select multiple different operating systems if the program supports it. I'm just selecting the one operating system. And I'm saying run whether or not a user is logged on, which means run with administrative rights, because I'm doing push-based software distribution. So that's all I did. I just imported, I created a package out of that source files, which is that one tar file we saw, and created the program for it. And now I'm going to go ahead and deploy this, the Operation Manager Client for Linux. I'm going to do a deploy, I'm going to deploy to my Linux clients collection, which has one member. I have to put the content on a distribution point. We only support on-premise DPs. Linux clients, Macintosh clients, mobile clients don't support cloud-based DPs. So they're all on-premise DPs. So we're putting on an on-premise DP. And this can be required. Here's the internet connection, which there isn't that concept really there, but we don't filter that out for whatever reason. Scheduling, I need to make it available. I'll make it available right now, as soon as possible. There were some problems in previous releases, previous builds, where if you gave it a date and time, and we passed that date and time, it wouldn't go back and run it. I think they got that fixed now, but just to be safe, I'm going to do these as soon as possible. And user experience, commit changes about embedded, which I'm not. Download from DP to local cache, and then install locally. Don't run if you're remote. If you don't put your client in the boundary group for content lookup, then you have to change the spot of one to download before execute. Otherwise, you're considered a slow network boundary if you're not within the boundary groups. And we're all done. So before we go and try and pull policies, we'll make sure policy provider is updated, which is not, because it says 339 and my clock says 341. So we need to wait for that to get updated. As soon as that gets updated, we'll go tell the client to pull policies, and then in a matter of minutes, we should go ahead and have that software installed. So it needs to update to say 341 or just updated to 341. It usually takes a couple little jumps in there. So it's 1505 now as far as size. I'll give it another couple of seconds and then I'll go pull policies. Or just jump up in size again. I don't even have to go look at the log file, just know from looking at the timing how long it takes. So we're good. Now we go back to our Linux client. And again, you don't have to force this. It would happen automatically. I'm just going to go ahead and force it so we aren't waiting. So let's force it to retrieve policies. And then we do our log file. And the software distribution process, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens with it. So it does take a while to go through the software distribution, to download the content, do all the analysis and content lookup and everything else. But it's doing the same type of scenarios your Windows clients does. It pull the policy, hey, there's software distribution. Oops, it's at the deadline. I need to install it now. MP, what distribution point can I use to get this content from? Oh, here's the content. Let me download the content to my local cache. Once it's all downloaded, and then it will go ahead and kick off the command line that's specified for this program, and that will be done. It should be done now because it says if the package is not intended to persist in the cache, deleting the cache. So that's the last line for this. So it should be, it downloaded cache, it ran the program, it wasn't supposed to persist it, so it automatically cleans up the cache. So this program should be installed now. So we do a dir/opt Microsoft SCX. There you see it installed files now. Install those files. And I'm not good with the, what is it? PS-EL grep SCX. Yeah, there you see the SCX SIM server. That's the process name for the Operation Management Client Agent. So we install that Operation Management Client Agent. If we've got our status back in the site server, we would go here and go to the console, go to monitoring workspace, and deployments. I would go ahead and run summarization for that guy. And ignore this column here where it shows up, you can't read anything, Operations Manager Client for Linux install, and that's just because of the screen resolution. You guys don't use 1024 by 768 on your screens. You guys have these big 47-inch monitors that you're working with, so you get much better resolution. Let's go ahead and do a refresh here, and still unknown. Again, in my environment, I've got the state message stuff set to 2 minutes. In your production environment, it's going to be 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes before the state to return back. So it'll take it a moment. We could probably go check and see real quick. State sys 344. That's probably just me looking at forcing it to do its work. When the state system updates, then it will come back and I'll be able to refresh, and then I'll get my appropriate status back saying that we are all good. There was the one for the Ops Manager client. Oh, no, it's 2 successes. I only told to install, I actually did two different users. My fault. That's right, it's 2 different users I told to install. Yeah, it didn't send the state back in yet. that still could have updated. So we'll not hold and wait for him. We'll get kicking on so Panu can do his Macintosh stuff, but I'll come back over here right before he does his demo, and we'll verify that we have success for our deployment, which we already know by looking at the client, but he will report in success. Traditionally, you're doing software deployments most of the time, with the maintenance windows, which generally are after hours. So you're not doing real-time software distribution, monitoring right now. You're creating your stuff now, you're deploying your stuff now, but it's happening after hours. So when you come in the morning, you've had your 15 minutes of time period for the status to come back to the site. It's been processed and summarized already. So all you do is go in there and hit refresh. Let's do one more summarization because I don't remember what the size was, even though the time hasn't changed. And let's do one more quick little check, and then if not, we'll just. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it did get the status back. So that's it. That's what we have for the Linux environment. That didn't feel good. I got to cover the chair. The two number one things on the requests from our top customers are desired configuration, so settings management for these boxes as well as OSD. So they want to extend beyond just inventory and software distribution to desired configuration or settings management and the ability of deploying the operating system through Configuration Manager, which we don't have those in Service Pack 1. Service Pack 1 is going to be installation, discovery, inventory, which you can modify, and then push-based software distribution. Pull-based software distribution is not that big of a deal since we're only supporting server-based platforms, and traditionally there's nobody logged on to the server, so yes, I want the software anyway. So pushing to servers is fine. And again, we do support maintenance windows, so you control when the software is installed. But we are looking at additional things in the post-SP1 timeframe to get additional capabilities. We're working to see what we can do. Any questions on that before I move on? No? Okay. And we go to 2:15, so I got half an hour. Okay. Hopefully your demo's only 2 seconds. Yeah. Okay, Macintosh support. So we give you more support for Macintoshes as far as capabilities than you get. I was going to give you the table, but that would make it hard for you to project, wouldn't it? My slides. You get discovery. And this does include network discovery, which you can technically discover a Linux, Unix box through network discovery, because we can find anything with an IP address, potentially. So we do have that. But this also includes Active Directory discovery if you domain joined your Macintoshes. So if you join in your Active Directory environment, you can do AD system discovery, and you'll find your Macintosh computers. Hardware inventory. So very similar to the inventory I showed you on the Linux environment. Same type of hardware inventory. Software inventory is done as part of hardware inventory. So it's not a separate software inventory process like you have in Windows environments. It's more like that add remove programs of registered software. Oops, now if I went back to my Linux box, if I were to go back there and do another hardware inventory, it'd be Delta, and it would come back and tell me that SCX, whatever it was, is installed now. Remember I showed you the list of installed apps, it didn't have it in there. But we do get that through your hardware inventory as well for the Macintosh. But now you get settings management. So you get settings management through shell scripts and preferences to the device itself. And then your software distribution is done through applications, not packages and programs. So you're doing applications. Remember I showed you the software distribution. It said the Mac OS X was an application type. So we're doing through application deployments. Software updates is done through software distribution. And settings management to verify whether you're compliant or not. Out of scope, which means not included in Service Pack 1, is self-service portal and an application catalog for Safari that lets end users go there and browse for software and pull it. So no optional software distributions. It's required or forced push-based software distribution in Service Pack 1. Operating system deployment, again, way up the top of the list. And then remote control. People want to be able to remote control these clients, and we don't have that. You can do so through link desktop sharing or third-party products, but that's up on the list as well. So the two biggest requests we have are the self-service portal, so optional software distribution, and then OSD support for Macintoshes. And then remote control is another fairly common one. System requirements. With our SP1 RTM, we're only going to support initially 10.6 Snow Leopard and 10.7 Lion. We're not going to support 10.8. That's going to be a post-SP1 update. We'll support Mountain Lion for 10.8. So it's 10.6 and 10.7. We know Mountain Lion's a brand new one that's out there, and everybody's downloading and installing it. So we want to get there. She's not going to get there for SP1. But we're hoping it won't be terribly long after we release SP1, but we'll have an update that will let you support the 10.8 platforms. Some of our TAP customers have been testing it as well as us internally, and it's looking really, really good, so hopefully it won't be too bad of a deal. No real extra hardware required as far as your infrastructure. It does require Service Pack 1. There's no support for this in RTM, so it is Service Pack 1 based. No special hardware. It does require HTTPS, so you have to have your management point and your distribution points configured for SSL-based communications. The architecture, here shows you it's not an animated slide, but on the far left-hand side is your Macintosh client with the client running. There's a client agent gets installed and running on the client. And then you'll pull policies from your management point over HTTPS. You'll request content location from the management point again. You'll go download your content from the distribution point, just like you normally would, a Linux client or a Windows client. So it operates very much like a standard computer does. So again, no new learning or training of your admins to change how they work. Now, client deployment is very similar to what I showed you on the Linux. There's no push-based install for Macintoshes and no push-based install for Linux Unix. It's self-service driven installation. So you can go ahead and there's install tools. There'll be a client agent, just like I mentioned for Linux Unix, you have to download the client agent from the web. It's not going to get included with our product. For those that did play around beta, we did include the beta Mac client with our beta, just because we wanted to get some additional testing out there to make sure everybody had it. But with the RTM, it's not going to be included with our RTM product, and you have to download it from the web. And there's a couple different spots in our UI where you can go into one on the setup screen and one on the, something I'll show you later on, where you can download additional clients. And that will take you to the spot to download the Mac client or the appropriate Linux Unix platforms. So you go ahead and run an enroller tool to go ahead and enroll that into your site, supplying appropriate credentials. And then you'll go ahead and install it using CCM setup, just like you would a Windows client. And then it goes ahead and pulls policies and does the rest of the work as you would expect it to. And then you get this Configuration Manager applet available to you, very much like the Configuration Manager applet in a Windows box. So this should do your properties. And Panu's going to show you that when he gets into the demo here in a few minutes. Distribution of binaries, again, they don't come with our product, so you have to go download the content from the being the client agent from the web. And then you can go ahead and install it through the process we just talked about. And users need to enroll their devices. So you need to go in there and enroll the devices. You can email them or put a web link up there with the process for enrolling and doing the roller and installing the client agent. There are certificates required, whether it's a user-based certificate or a system-based certificate. You're on your own to manage those certificates outside the configuration manager space as far as the deployment process, even in the Windows environment. We don't deploy to configuration manager certificates. Now, the one thing is in the Windows environment, you can use self-signed certificates, so when you install your client, if you're not in an HTTPS mode, you create a self-signed certificate and we'll go ahead and create that for you. But in a SSL environment, you have to go out there and do your own deployment of certificates just like you do in a Macintosh environment, or Mac just like you do in a Windows environment. From there, you go ahead and do the deployment and you upgrade your site and upgrade your clients and do the appropriate updating of your clients through application deployment because you've already got the client agent there. So you go ahead and do software distribution, update the configuration on your client when we come up with new versions of it or hotfixes for it. Renewing client certificates, again, you're on your own for that. You're on your own for managing your certificates that you need for this. So again, just like in a Windows environment, you'll be on your own to get that managed outside of the configuration manager space. And you do the ability of blocking clients like you do for Windows clients, blocking them so they can't communicate with your site. Here's a command. I don't know if this is the same command Panu ran to go ahead and install his client, or run sudo commands, CCM setup. Specify the MP you want to initiate communications with, and then your subject name for your certificate that you're utilizing. And then do a reboot, and once you've done that, it'll go ahead and install your client agent, and you're off and running. Once you've done that, as far as if you want, prior to installation of the client, if you want to go up and discover which ones you have in your environment, you can do network discovery. You can network discovery. You can go ahead and pull any appropriate box on the network that has an IP address and a subnet mask. whether it's Linux, whether it's a router, whether it's a Windows device, or whether it's a Macintosh, you can do that. Our recommendation is to domain join your Macs and then just do your normal AD system discovery that you're utilizing to discover your Windows boxes. And then you'll have those guys discovered. Now, there's still no push-based install, but at least that gives you an idea of what Macintosh you have out there, and then you can know the appropriate group of people to send email to or create your enrollment scripts for and so on, give them the procedures for enrolling their Macintosh and installing the client agent. And here's a look at the inventory. So very similar to the classes and attributes that we had for the Linux Unix environment, a subset of what you get on your Windows environment. And the screenshot is on installed applications. So you can see the type of software that you'd be detecting with your inventory of your Macintosh computer as well. Settings management, two different options there. There's preferences and there's shell scripts. So preferences to go ahead and set system level objects, and then shell scripts to go ahead and tighten the security on those and do some verification on things. But you're only doing these to systems and not to the users. There's no user targeted settings management like we do have in a Windows environment. Software distribution. Software distribution is a little bit more complicated than like the Linux, Unix, or just a traditional Windows thing. I showed you that there's a, well, you see the type there says Mac OS X. That's the application type or the deployment type we have is Mac OS X. But to create this, it shows you the 4 different types of file formats from Macintosh packages we support. You have to basically take the Macintosh file format application, put it into a Windows format that we consume in ConfigMgr, and get it on our distribution point, and then let the Macintosh clients have access to it. So that's a separate utility called the CM app util. So that's a utility that we have that you'll go ahead and distribute to your Macintosh environment where you have these source files, the application. You'll run these source files through the CM app utility. It packages them up into a, actually the next slide, I think. Yeah. Second bullet, CM map. It creates a CM map file format out of your Macintosh package format. It wraps them up into a format we consume, .cm map. You then import that into your Configuration Manager console as you create an application. You distribute that application to your distribution point, and then deploy the application out to your clients, and then they'll go ahead and take the CM Mac app and they'll basically unzip it. They'll extract it out into the appropriate APPX or APP or package or whatever format, and then they'll go ahead and run the installer for that application. And it shows you a couple of different command line parameters if you wish to use those. Software updates. Software updates, there is no integration with the Apple software updates like a Microsoft Update environment. So software updates are handled through software distribution. So you use software distribution to find your software updates and deploy them through to the clients through normal software distribution, just like you would for a Linux Unix environment. And then use settings management to verify that you do have those. That's another thing that's on the list. Things to do is integrate with the Apple Update Store and give you easier software updates management without having to go and basically do software distribution to distribute updates. And last couple of slides here, endpoint protection for Mac and Linux. So those are the capabilities. Inventory, discovery, inventory for the client agent. After you do inventory, you can create collections and appropriate for targeting if you wish to. Settings management, and then obviously software distribution. Now, settings management, or excuse me, endpoint protection, we did release earlier this year, I want to say it was February, or something in the, quite long ago, we released an endpoint protection service for both Macintoshes and for Linux environments. This is not the same endpoint protection you have for Windows. So it's not the endpoint protection that's integrated into our Configuration Manager environment. This is a product we licensed from another company. We branded it as endpoint protection, but it does not integrate at all with Configuration Manager. So no centralized management capabilities here, like you have with the Windows environment. It's purely just to get some antivirus, malware stuff running for those platforms so that you're protected. Our goal is to get this integrated with Configuration Manager, just like the Windows environment, so you have a lot more centralized capabilities for managing it. But right now, it's a standalone tool, but it does work from everything I heard pretty well. It was a fairly well-respected third party that we went ahead and licensed technology of. But it's there available today for 10.6, 10.7, and for a couple different Linux platforms.
Sorry, can you say the name of the product?
ESEP.
Never heard. Sorry.
That's right. You guys say it differently over here. That's why I didn't hear it. No, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was ESET, E-S-E-T. And there's like the balloon, you get a notification you get on a Windows environment. There's the same notification you get on a Macintosh environment when something pops up. But it is available for volume licensed customers today. Again, it has been for like 8, 9 months already. And basically just make sure you're protected. And there's a monitoring pack for endpoint protection for Linux in the operations manager environment. And again, make sure you're protected and you're covered. So here's just the last slide I have on this. So your summary by platform. And it shows you what capabilities we have for the Linux Unix versus the Macintosh client support. And obviously the Macintosh client support has more features because it does have settings management, which is a fairly common request and again, number one request for the Linux Unix environment. Okay, with that, oh, did somebody? No? Okay. With that, I was going to let Panu has an environment set up where he was going to do a demo of this for you.
First of all, for this site service, for the management point, what you need to do is enable HTTPS and also disallow mobile devices to use this management point. So you need certificates in place in order to get those Mac clients enrolled. You could have an enrollment point which would actually install those necessary certificates. I haven't installed those in my environment. I have manually inserted certificates on my Mac client, but enrollment points is another possibility to get those certificates. And over here, I have inventory from my Mac client, so you can get it. Basic information, what is the model, disk drives, install applications, OS. It has quite good information about those Mac clients.
Go back to inventory installed applications. Look at that top of the list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let you know we're there. We're always present.
Yeah. CPUs, services, system. So quite normal stuff. And then if we want to do some software library, actually here are a couple of examples. Adobe Reader. So here is already a new deployment type for Macintoshes. Here you can see the file. I need to somehow put it to the Windows environment so I can point it with UNC and get access of that file. I think I should have a later releases for the, yeah, okay, so let's create a new one. Create application. And what do we got? Let's find the UNC.
I like the syntax as bad as I do doing the demo.
Yeah. Now, just the name. Basic information. And that's it. Quite easy. For me, it took some time before I understood that you have to run that
command on your Mac client I was looking for from my site server, but then I figured out, okay, it has to be run on the Mac. So after that it was quite easy. Okay, and now I will do deployment. So same thing, what is your collection, device collections, Mac client collection, no DPs yet, and required. Let's have it as soon as possible. And if we go to my Mac client, so this is the UI. It's quite simple. It has this one action, connect now. So you cannot mistype or do stupid things about this.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah, you don't press it. It takes a little while, and it should get a new policy. And while it's doing that, when you get this Mac client, you have this CCM setup command to install your Mac client, and you also have tools. And from the tools you can find this CM app util, and also diagnostics. What does this do? It just collects all the log files from your Mac client and it creates one package so you can move it somewhere else. Here you can see that, okay, there's new software available. Deadline is 60 minutes. What do you want to do? Okay, let's install now. So this has much better UI than Linux client.
Yes. Being if there is UI.
Ooh. Problem with me is I haven't tested. I have already installed Adobe Reader 10, so I suppose it might have a problem. But this is a good example. We might have problems with Macs also.
Notice my demos worked.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't get cocky. I got more to do.
Over here, you can see that these Mac certificates, and from here I inserted two certificates. One certificate for root CA, which is this one, and one certificate for Mac client. And those are necessary to get this Mac client working. Yes?
One question about, is there a way to distribute like a shortcut to remote app also to Macintosh simultaneously like with the Windows workstations? That there would be like one shortcut to, let's say, Microsoft Word, which is coming from Citrix in Macintosh case and from the local machine in Windows case. Did you understand what I meant?
So like remote app?
Like a remote app to the Macintosh that I would distribute from my SCCM to all my machines, including Macintoshes. That they would have the same application available everywhere.
Currently, like in that scenario, you wouldn't need to have a user-paid applications. But I don't think you can do remote apps with Mac.
Remote apps being like Citrix or Appy?
Citrix.
Yeah.
Like Citrix or something.
Yeah, not that I know of, but I'm not a Macintosh person, so.
Neither am I.
So I think the main point is if you can package your Citrix app to one of those supported versions, which can be translated to the CM Mac format. In that case, you could do that, but I have no idea. And for these applications, we have the same kind of monitoring. So let's see what was the problem. If the state messages has came back. Okay, that's someone else. Okay, that's a classic. No additional information. But we have the same kind of mechanism to getting back the status of the installation, like with normal Linux and Windows machines. I think the main problem with my environment was that it already had the early version of the Adobe Reader. Yeah. So, do you have any questions about this? So,
Yes.
yeah.
Do you have to be an administrator in order to use the client? Can normal user with normal user rights use the client?
Should be able to, because it should be running in their, you know, like local system, what we have, we call it local
It
system.
doesn't require the administrator's password. No.
No. Nope, nope. Does the agent, did you show the agent edition? Does it show up as Mac? Like mine shows up as Unix and Linux?
Oh yeah.
I know you're running an older version.
Yeah, but it just show it as a Mac.
Mac OS. So you'll be able to create collections appropriately for all your different types of clients, so you can target appropriate software to them. So that's very cool.
But this is one difference. This one shows as a mobile. So my client is like a mobile client, and that's why it needs those certificates.
Yeah, remember you showed that you have to select the option in your MP to allow mobile devices to access the management point. So we basically treat it like a mobile client, like a mobile phone, as far as the support right now. So, so that shows a mobile as opposed to desktop or server. Well, if we got a moment, I got a couple more things I can show you. I forced hardware inventory I forced hardware inventory back on my Linux client, so I can show you the inventory reported in, and it does show that the SCX application now is deployed. Back into full screen mode, and the forced hardware inventory. Now you can see SCX appears in the application inventory. So it did do the Delta inventory, and it tells me that the new application is installed. So it did that nicely for us. So that's very good. And then we got just a minute. So one thing you guys were supposed to remind me to show you earlier, because I need to switch images for the last thing I'm doing, was that client notification stuff. You guys were supposed to tell me and you forgot. But anyway, so what I want to do is the very easy way of showing you this is if I go to a collection of clients, and I go to like configuration manager clients, and I go to my collection, go to endpoint protection. Then here's the three actions we have: full scan, quick scan, and download definitions. In the RTM product, you can do this as well. What that does, it creates a policy, and the next time the clients call policy, it will kick out that action. Now, if I initiate this, and I don't have endpoint protection installed here, so it's not going to do anything. But if I had endpoint protection installed, this will go ahead and kick out this right away for me. But what I can show you is, let me go to my administration workspace. Let me go to my client settings, default client settings, go to computer agent, and notice that my organization name here is blank. So what appears in Software Center is the default of IT organization. So I'm going to go in here and put in Helsinki event. And I'll let that process for a second. I'll switch over to my Windows client, and I'll go ahead and load Software Center so that you can verify that it is the default. So up here in the upper right is IT organization. So that's the default setting. We haven't given it a name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these real-time actions to force this guy to pull policies right now from the admin console. So I'll go back to my site server, and I'll just verify the policy has been updated. 415, yep, policy's been updated. So now in my console, what I'll do is I'll go back to my collection of clients. I'll go to ConfigMgr clients. I'll right-click. I'll go to client notification, and notice we have an action here under client notification of download computer policy. So not only does this work for endpoint protection, but you can force it to pull computer policies real time. So the site server is saying, hey, you go out there and pull policies right now. So I'm going to go ahead and lost that when I zoomed out, but I'll go back in here and do that. Client notification, download policies. It says there's 3 resources in this collection. You're going to generate network traffic right now. Are you sure you want to do that? And I'm brilliant. I'm going to say yes. I do want to do that. Click OK. And then within moments, if this is working, within moments, we should have Windows, CCM, logs, client notification, CCM notification agent will kick in. That's the receiver end of this. And then you would see data transfer service kick in, and policy agent, policy provider would all kick in. There you see data transfer service just downloaded something. And I don't know why this guy hasn't updated yet, but and policy agent, policy provider have all kicked in. That tells me it's probably done now. I go back over here and I hit refresh. Now maybe it doesn't refresh. Maybe I've got to close it and start back up. There we go. It says Helsinki event. So I forced the client to go pull policies from the admin console. So that you guys have always requested us to do those right-click actions, that some of those right-click tools that third parties have. We're starting to do that now with the endpoint protection stuff and with the download computer policies to go ahead and force them to pull policies on the fly, and as well as not just from there, but if you go to your monitoring workspace, and then I mentioned there were 2 different nodes for endpoint protection. There was the, again, I don't have endpoint protection installed in this image, but here's the client-centric view. We also have this malware-centric view where if I had some malware, I could right-click on the malware, I could say, allow threat. That's a real-time action. It pushed that approval process for this threat down to the client immediately. Or if I say, restore quarantine files. So we find the threat, we're going to go out there and quarantine those files so they can't be utilized and cause damage on your system. When you say, oh wait, that's a real threat, go ahead and restore these files so they can be used now. Those are real-time actions. So you can initiate those in your client as well. So our start with this right-click tools type stuff is for the endpoint protection stuff, as well as this download computer policies. So you can do that. And the last thing I'll show you, then we'll break, it's a break time now, is you can track this centrally from your console by going to the client operations node. So the client operations node tells you what your action is, in this case download computer policies, and it gives you a status of where you're at with this. Let me go do a run summarization. And this will summarize all the responses back from clients. And you'll see now, okay, when it gets done summarizing, or waiting for state message back from clients, which may not have happened yet. But it'll come back and tell me there were 3 clients in the collection, probably 2 successes now, or maybe 3, or maybe the client is still running. And then any failed offline clients are clients that don't have that TCP connection set up with the MP right now. And then unknown is just clients that I don't know what their status is. Let's go ahead and see if we got any additional. There we go. So I'm 100%. So even those other 2 clients that I haven't even touched, my site server is a client, my Windows 8 client, they downloaded this policy and they've implemented that. So now if I go to my site server and do a software center, it says Helsinki event as well. So if I did the same thing on the Windows 8 client. So from my site server, I did download computer policy on the collection and it hit everybody. And they all did that policy poll and got updated. But you can track this from the site server end of things in this node in the console. You may do this frequently, so you may have a lot of options here. So you want to go ahead and say, I want to clean this up, so I can just go ahead and say, delete that. And so it'll delete it from the console, so you're back to a clean slate again, so you can monitor the next things you're doing. So, okay, any other questions before we break? Everybody wants a break. Okay, so we'll be back at 2:35. Oh, hang on.
Okay, let's have 20 minutes.
20? Ooh. Okay, Hanu's a lot nicer than I am. You're getting a 20-minute break, so back at 2:40.